it going, everybody? This is going to be the first video of the Horse Torques Diesel YouTube channel. Hoping to bring you guys just a little insight into what I have going on and maybe help some of you along the way. I could not have gotten to where I am today without the help of people that inspired me and kind of led me down a path to success. Sometimes failure, but mostly success. A little bit about myself. My name's Josh. I've been doing diesel motorsports for 10 years. I've owned a lot of different trucks. I've owned mostly Cummins powered Dodges. I have owned 2 Fords, a 6.0 and an old body style 7.3, and 1 Duramax. It was a GMC Denali. Out of all the trucks I've owned, that one was the shortest lived. I had it about 2 weeks. After talking to everybody from Instagram and stuff like that, seems like just a lot of people want to build cool 12 valves, and that's awesome. I mean, I love doing it. There's 2 things that I love about 12 valves. Number 1, most parts are really cheap. Number 2, it's something you can tune yourself. On my 05, you know, I have to rely on somebody else to tune it. They need software, stuff like that. On this guy, you know, I take the data that I can see, hear, feel, and I'm able to correct it on the track by my own brain power, which is really nice. There's also a downside to 12 valves. With the static timing and the mechanical fuel injection, these trucks aren't as multi-purpose. You know, you don't see a lot of 1,200 horsepower 12 valves that people say daily driven or they tow with and stuff like that. Not saying that they're not out there, just not very common. Everybody on Instagram has 1,000 horsepower daily common rail trucks, and they work. You know, it's what we're doing with my 05. We want to crack that 1,000 horsepower and still use it for a truck. On a 12 valve, that's just not the case. You start to get into these bigger pumps, bigger injectors, bigger turbos, and with that static timing that you need for that high RPM power, they just become dogs on the street. And yeah, it's the nature of the beast, you know. These are more, if you're going to go to the competition level, that's it. You know, they're not street trucks anymore. You know, they might be driven on the street, but I don't recommend it. But they are cheap. You know, you can get into these trucks relatively cheap. I know lately it seems like people are out of their mind trying to sell 12 valves for more than they were worth when they were brand new. But hey, if they get the money, they get the money. They're just not going to get my money. I bought this truck off a guy in Georgia. It came with some good parts, and we reused a lot. And we did a budget built UCC qualifier, and I had a lot of help. A lot of the ideas weren't necessarily my own even. I took a lot of stuff from the guys at Power Driven, Seth Farrell, John Schrato from Granby Truck Stop helped us out. Some of the guys on CompetitionDiesel.com helped out. And yeah, it was a group effort, and we'll be going back. I'm excited to be going back. A little stronger, a little faster. Hopefully, got some kinks worked out. That truck went together really fast. It's not an excuse. It's just a fact. And mistakes were made, and they reared their ugly head. But the cool part about that 12 valve was I built it, so the only person I really had to blame was myself. I do all my own work, obviously not precision machining work. I just don't have the equipment, and transmissions I leave to the pros at Power Driven. I just recently kind of started digging into it and learning all about the different pressures and what they mean, and kind of being able to identify issues, which is always a good thing. But anyway, I wanted to start this kind of budget build 12 valve slash my daily, maybe not my daily life, but like things that are truck related. Just keep in mind, I am married, I have children, I have a job, so the videos might not be all the time, but I want to put out good content when they are out. And I don't have a fancy garage. This is my 2-car garage. This is where all the magic happens. And yeah, I hope you guys are open to hearing some ideas and stuff, and we'll go from there. What I want to go over today is pretty much some common weak points and kind of the differences in 12 valve engines. There was, in Dodge Ram trucks, you had different injection pumps, and you're able to tell if it's a stock truck. You're able to see it based upon the marker on the adapter plate. There'll be where it'll say like 160, 175, 180, or 215 horsepower at, I want to say it's like 2400 RPM or something on there, and that's how you can tell. Now if you have a truck that's been into already, there's a Bosch ID tag on the side of the pump, and you can just search that number and it'll tell you what injection pump you have. 160 pumps are the smallest, 215 being the largest, and then you had a 175 pump and a 180 pump. Some of it is determined on which transmission came with the truck. Like 215s are very common in a 5-speed. I don't even think they came from the factory 215 pump with an automatic. The 312 valves I've owned all came with 160 pumps. They were all early like 95, 96 12 valves, and then I did have 198. It was a 5-speed that came with a 215 pump. 215 pumps, 180 pumps are very common to get hot rodded. A lot of people dog on the 160 pump. After talking to Seth Farrell at Farrell Diesel Service, those pumps are still very capable pumps, especially for a street truck. So if you have one, don't get down on yourself. You could still make really good power. You know, 700 horse. I want to say Seth can take it a little farther, but from what I've seen on a 12 mil pump, with the like 215s, you can crack 1,000. A 180, you're right there, kind of close. And then the 175 pump was a California pump. I really don't know too much about it other than I've never had one, and when you go to time it, it has a different cam lift. So I'm assuming that California tried to make it stupid and emissions compliant. And I kind of want to go over the differences here on the pistons, because the pistons actually determine the bowls are different. And I have a 160 pump piston, what I believe is a 215 pump piston. I could be wrong. And then I have the pistons that are in my race truck, just to kind of show you guys why we went this route for the budget build. So here we have the 160 pump piston, 215 pump, and then here's a VP44 piston. Now as you can see, these pistons have offset bowls, and this one has a centered bowl. Now for my race truck, we went with a center bowl pattern. So we weren't just taking a regular 12 valve injector spray pattern into this bowl. We were actually taking one that had been for a center bowl that came from Power Driven. And what you'll see here is the size of the bowls are different. So on a 160 pump, let me get this so y'all can actually see it. On a 160 pump piston, you have about 2,031. On a 215 piston, the bowls are a little bit bigger. Okay. As you can see here on the 160 piston, you have, get that so you guys can see, you have just under about 2 inches bowl. On a 215 piston,
you have an extra 38 thousandths. Now, on the VP44 piston, this is a standard output piston, by the way, you have about 2 3/8 of an inch bowl. Now, that allows us, the bigger the bowl, the more timing you can run without spraying out of the bowl. So for a 160 truck, the problem that you run into is you can't run really high timing. Now, don't get discouraged, because it'll still be okay. The 215 pumps, you can run a little bit more timing because the bowl's larger. And then a VP44 being the largest, we're able to run more timing. Now, the nice part about the VP44 is, let me go grab a 6/7 piston real quick. And then here is your common rail 6/7 piston. It's kind of see the difference here. So the bowls have gotten larger. Now, what's nice about these VP44 pistons is the better ring land on this top ring up here is more pronounced and stronger than a 12 valve piston. It's kind of like a cheap performance piston. Now, what Power Driven did for me is they fly cut that. This is to clear the valves for a big cam. I got some old valves out of the old 12 valve head, so you can see here they've been fly cut, so that way we don't have any valve interference on that big Hazel cam I run on my UCC truck. Now, if you start running these bigger cams, even 188-220 from Hamilton, they recommend you to check piston to valve clearance, because if you do smack it, you're going to leave a nice little dent in the piston here, and you're going to bend that valve, and you are going to have a bad day. So it's really easy to check. The way I do it is I take the old head gasket with the new piston, and I go ahead and interference the piston with the valves, and I just take Play-Doh, my son's Play-Doh, and I put it in the piston bowl, and then I let it smash to make sure that we have good clearance. If you have an engine that's had machine work, the head's been surfaced, the deck's been surfaced, you're making that area smaller and smaller, and that's why on the 188-220 cam, Hamilton wants you to check, because you're getting close. Or if you're like me and you don't want to do all that work, I bought a 178-208 cam for my 05, since that engine has had machine work. Now, put this 6/7 piston back, and I guess here, while I got these out, you can kind of see the difference here in just bore size. Try and get that in there for you. You can see, not much, but man, it does make a difference on big turbo spool ups. So that kind of goes over the pistons. So the injection pump your truck came with also determined the piston bowl size, and that becomes important. Now, when we're talking about spraying, the fuel sprays into this bowl. Now what happens is, if you spray it too early, as the piston's coming up, right, you're spraying, what will happen is the fuel will actually be spraying outside the bowl. I'll put a couple of clips of my truck. We actually turned the timing too high for my piston setup, and you can see, didn't make a lot of power, sounded awful, hot, really hot EGTs, and really smoky. And we were just spraying outside the bowl. That was at 34 degrees of timing. Backed it back down to 32, and it seems to be happy, I guess. So that's why the two reasons we went with the VP44 piston: the better ringland and the larger bowl, so we're able to run a little bit more timing. Now these are the new pistons for the UCC truck. The UCC truck last year was super low compression, and let me get this camera moved for you guys here. Grab a rag, wipe my hands off.
Alright, so what we did last year, 12 valve rods in this engine, still are in it, VP44 piston that was completely decked, the same depth as this fly cut, and we opened up the bowls. We did that to keep it alive. The lower the compression is, the less strain you're going to have on the rods. 12 valve rods don't generally break. I'm sure they have. I'm sure somebody's sister's, uncle's, brother's Cummins 12 valve has broken a rod. But they usually bend. In order to keep that engine alive at the power level we wanted to, with the nitrous I knew I was going to spray into it, what we did was we took a 16.5 to 1 compression ratio piston and we made it almost 12.5 to 1. I think it was like 12.7 to 1. And we opened up the piston rings. Now, piston rings is another thing, and that's where you kind of get into this gray area. The larger the piston rings are, the more blow by you're gonna have, and oil consumption as it's trying to sneak by the rings. But the less you're gonna destroy your cylinder walls when you do hit it with all that nitrous and all that heat. As they expand, they won't butt, and what I mean by that is where the ring actually compresses all the way against itself. Essentially the ring expands to a point where the gap's gone and it butts and then it breaks the ring, and then you're gonna have a really bad day. As of right now, this engine has stayed together. It does consume a little bit of oil, which we expect with the low compression and the really loose piston rings. The other thing we did to keep it alive is opened up the piston to wall. Now, what the piston to wall refers to is these pistons, you measure at the skirt, it's about 7/8 up, 7/8 of an inch above the bottom of the skirt is where you want to measure the the outer diameter of these pistons. And piston to wall is the difference between the cylinder bore and the piston diameter. Now, a lot of trucks from the factory new spec is 2 to 3 thousandths. Works great for grandpa's hay hauler and stuff like that. In a performance application, as the heat rises, these pistons swell, and essentially what can happen is it'll swell to the point where it'll lock in the cylinder, it'll melt down because of all the heat from the friction. So by opening up that piston to wall, we were able to gain that clearance for the high horsepower, high RPM, high heat situations like that. And on mine, we kind of run custom. Generally number 6 cylinder runs the hottest, and then 1 and 5, believe it or not, are actually the next hottest. So my engine is actually bored for 9 thousandths piston to wall on cylinders 2, 3, and 4, 9.5 thousandths for cylinders 1 and 5, and then actually 10 thousandths for cylinder number 6. These are not numbers I made up. These are numbers that were provided to me from the people at Power Driven, and those guys have done nothing but help me out. So that's basically what we do. The rings that come off the piston and are filed to that bore go back in with that one. Now, the nice part about 12 valves is most 12 valves, not all, anything that has a, I want to say like 94, 95, 96, most 97s I've ever taken apart, and some 98s do, some don't.
they have 14mm main studs. Now, or sorry, main bolts. Now, if you look here, what you can see is, bring it in a little closer here. So if you look here, you can see, this thing will just focus. There we go. You can see this is 14mm threads, but this is still a 12mm shank. Now, that's okay. What you can do is, since your block's already tapped for these 14mm mains, you can get yourself a set of ARP 14mm main set, part number 247-5402, and you'll be good. You'll have a nice strong bottom end. On my race truck, we actually just have main studs. That's it. Main studs, new main bearings, and they were the main bearings out of Todd's old race engine. So yeah, we got pretty lucky with that. Some of the other things with a 12 valve is this cylinder head. Alright, so this is just your, this was a stock 12 valve head. In my race truck, this was the head that failed. Basically what happened was, this valve is actually not too bad, but what happened is this valve actually tulipped, and it basically this part sucks in through the top. Just a lot of heat, a lot of years of abuse, and then basically what happened is 12 valve heads don't have like press-in seats from the factory, and what happened was we actually cracked all the valve seats through each valve. So basically, when the valves are shut, it still can cross leak between the intake to the exhaust. And I run a factory shelf head. The head in my engine right now is still a factory shelf head. And what they do is they go in through the intake valve, which is always the larger one. If you ever get confused on a 12 valve, the intake valve on a stock head is the larger one, the exhaust one being the smaller one. And if you really are confused, you can stick your finger in the hole and you will see this is the exhaust valve, and you can feel it actually come through this port my fingers are touching. And you can see here the fire ring grooves that were cut into this head. Now, on this head, we went, and what a lot of people do to save money is it's a lot easier to just cut the fire ring all the way in the head, because the head's easy to come off the block. In order to do the block firing, you got to get the block surfaced, and it's a lot easier and cheaper to just have them cut the whole fire ring into the head. Now, there's a lot of misinformation on these 12 valve heads about how they don't flow and stuff like that, and to a certain extent they're right. I think they flow like 160 CFMs from the factory. But what's nice about these 12 valve heads is they take the RPM a lot better. I know on a lot of my common rails I'll have a rocker bridge failure and stuff like that. And this head only had 60-pound valve springs with Hazley titanium keepers. The keepers from Hazley just allowed us to spin more RPM because of the angle of the keeper. Another thing, when you're doing budget builds, this is a factory push rod. Okay, this right here. This is the Manton, this is Power Driven Diesel's push rod. And now I did bend this one, for those wondering. I did in fact bend this push rod. Basically, we had I missed a shift and I spanked like 6,000 RPM. So this push rod is bent. This is Power Driven Diesel's Stage 1 push rod. Really affordable, and I've spun over 6,000 RPM and I've made just under 1,200 horsepower on a Stage 1 push rod. So, you know, save yourself a little money. You don't need the crazy Stage 3 push rods if you're trying to do that 1,000 horsepower mark, which seems to be what a lot of guys like to do it. The other thing that you should address if you are taking apart your engine and you're trying to do a build is the oil pump. This is the factory oil pump out of my 12 valve. It had 250,000 miles on it, and as you can see here, it had quite a bit of thrust play almost from spinning for so long. And it's always a good thing. These aren't that expensive, and literally this is the heart that pumps life into your engine. Without good oil pressure, you're not able to supply that rotating assembly with the proper lubrication. The faster it'll die. So we went ahead and we replaced this while the engine was out. Alright, so some of the things on this Buget Build 12 valve. This is a short block out of a 1995 truck. It had 253,000 miles on it. The great part about these engines is as you increase the horsepower, the heat begins to rise and things begin to swell. Like we just talked about pistons. The piston to wall clearance starts to shrink. The piston rings start to get tighter. The great part about a lot of these trucks is with this many miles on them, they're almost in perfect condition to be hot rodded. When we measured this engine, it was about 6 thousandths piston to wall. It was about 6 thousandths piston to wall, and the ring gaps would have been perfect for like a 900 horse truck. It was ready to go because they're just broke in. I mean, not to sound cliche about how million-mile motor and stuff, and I'm sure they would last a million miles if all of us would stop driving around like teenagers in these things trying to make gobs of power. But this is just a factory 95 block. We have a Hazley machine firing set, 625 head studs, the 14mm mains. We have a Hazley cam. It's a intermediate pulling cam. So, intermediate pulling cam with Hamilton's cam retainer. Let me clear all this stuff off here. Hamilton cam's pulling retainer. We have a fleece coolant bypass. The reason why I use these, and these are kind of expensive, but to me they do two very valuable things. Number one, they have a thermostat in the back of the engine that opens up, and as we remember before, number 6 gets really hot. Whether you're daily driving it, pulling it, racing it, street racing it, or taking grandma to church, it gets hot. With having that coolant able to escape from back there, you're kind of decreasing that hot spot. It doesn't completely go away, but it does decrease. It also does another thing. It opens up when it opens up, it relieves pressure. You'll see a lot of guys that run clipped water pumps, or they'll have all those billet freeze plugs and stuff like that, and they're great, they really are, but this kind of addresses that problem instead of band-aiding it. When you're spinning 6,000 RPM like this engine has a few times, the coolant pressure is just insane, and by having that second exit, you're helping relieve that pressure. This truck just runs a O'Reilly's radiator, O'Reilly's radiator hoses. It has a stock intercooler that I spray painted so people would shut up about how my truck looked awful. And that's another thing you got to deal with a budget build. I spend all my money where it matters, on the inside. It's kind of like a fat chick with a great heart. That's kind of how my truck is. I still run a factory fan belt, and we'll give you guys a little tour of it. Sorry the lighting's kind of crappy. I don't know what to tell you other than deal with it. Get you guys focused here. So what we have is a compound turbo setup. The small turbo is a 366 74 with a .91 T4 housing. The big turbo is from Smeding Diesel, 488 96 132 T6 housing, and they work really well. Eventually that 366 is going to quit its job and send that compressor through the front. It's just, I've been super lucky. I use boots because they're cheap. I buy boots in 12-inch increments and I cut them up and I make like 2 or 3 or 4 boots out of it, and I use these spring clamps. Now, sorry about the lighting, guys. I use these spring clamps right there, and you'll notice they are maxed out. I've never blown a boot other than at UCC. I blew that boot, this one right here, and I blew it because it was a cheap boot, and I actually like blew it in 2 pieces. And yeah, let me get you guys back out here. Be patient with me. I'm sure I'll get better at this. This is the first run. I run a factory alternator. I don't know if I can get a good light down there. Factory water pump. There is a fluid dampener, and that is your factory fan pulley and fan clutch. I run it all. We have a stainless diesel T4 manifold. At the power level that I'm at, I'd recommend it. If you're gonna do compounds, I mean, the stock manifold's not that bad. Is it great? No, but it is free because it came with the truck. So use it. You know, that's the biggest thing I see, is a lot of people waste money on parts because they look cool and they don't actually need it. We have the Savage Fab valve cover breathers. No matter how hard I tried, they always leaked oil. It's not a bad reflection of them. They make a great product. My engine with the piston to wall and ring gaps just pukes oil. So what I did was I stuck steel wool in there and raised them up, and it's been a lot better. Still leaks oil, but it's a lot better. Basically every time I get done going down the track, I gotta wipe down the backside of the engine, and so that way they won't shut me down. Now here is the most expensive part of my engine. This 13mm Seth Farrell 13mm P-pump fire breathing horse torque making dragon. Alright. I don't know what else to say about Seth. I think his reputation speaks for himself. The dude is a genius, makes great stuff. Never had an issue with a Seth pump. I've owned many of them. I know lots of people that have. They have nothing but good things to say. Now, usually I tell people to rock the stock intake horn. It's really not as restrictive as all the big companies like to make it out to be. I mean, I'm sorry if you are one of those people, but you know, it is what it is. Unless they actually change the intake plenum size, like the opening there, it's not doing anything. However, I wanted to get rid of the heater grid, didn't need it, extra weight, and I wanted a nitrous port that flowed better. So I called up Savage Fab. They made me this. It's like a straight shot nitrous port, and then I got all these bungs here for my ghetto water injection, which leads me to the next thing, the water injection system. I run a, and you're gonna laugh at this too, but I run a Snow Performance and a Nitrous Express water meth kit, 2 pumps. The reason why I have to run 2 pumps is because when you make 120 pounds of boost and those pumps only put out 200 psi, you start opening up too many nozzles and it doesn't actually go into the intake. So I have one there. It's ran off of a progressive controller, which you can see right there, off boost pressure. And I have one down here in pre-intercooler, and then I have one here that kind of ghetto fogs this turbo to keep it cool. It is not recommended. You could possibly erode your compressor wheel. However, it only comes on when I spray nitrous, And if you're really worried about water erosion on your compressor wheel when you start unleashing a open -3 line of nitrous, I can't help you at that point. You're on your own. Now, what I did learn, the Snow Performance Controller can only read 90 pounds of boost. So, to compensate for that, the boost reference is on my focus, come on my wastegate controller, which only sees about 80 psi of boost. So that's how I did it. Is it the right way? Is it the wrong way? I don't know, but by golly, it does work. I would fire this truck up for y'all, but Phil at Diesel Performance Converters is trying to fix my retardedness. So if you watch this, Phil, I appreciate you, man. You've done a lot for me and everybody, and hope you know I don't take it for granted. Now, what turbos to run? It's all about what you're going to do with the truck. I don't have a generic answer for you. This is the first compound truck I've ever had. Is it cool? Sure. Is it hard on my bottom end? Yes. When you start making that torque curve come in later, you keep the engine alive. With compounds, you're bringing in that torque curve dangerously early. So like I said, with compounds, you bring it in early, stuff starts to come knocking out the side of the blocks, stuff like that. You're really hard on things. And that's why I used to run big singles all the time. The reason why I went with compounds is 12 valves don't spool well with high timing, even with the spool jet. And with UCC, you know, you gotta do 3 things, so you can't just do 1 thing. So that's how I went. The new setup is going to be a HX82, which is over there. I'll show you guys in another video kind of where the truck's going. Is going to be an HX82 over a 475, or sorry, 475 over an HX82, however you want to say it. But I'm so tired of hearing twin turbos. They're not twin turbos. Twins means they're the same, and they're not. So don't be one of those people. All right, that's like there's a couple of things that really grinds my gears, and the first one being calling compound turbos twin turbos. Just don't be stupid, because I'm laughing at you, and a lot of my friends are gonna laugh at you too. That being said, on compound turbo size, the smaller you make the atmospheric charger, or sorry, the secondary charger, the manifold charger, the better street manners it's gonna have, because you're able to get that drive pressure up, get that charger lit, and making air and burning the fuel that you're undoubtedly spewing soot everywhere as you're going down the road. Now, this is a pretty big gap, a 366 to a 488. So far it's worked well. I've never met anybody that had this set up on a 12 valve. It seems to work well in common rails. So if you're going to be daily driver, fun, tow rig, the 475 as an atmospheric charger is good to like 750 horsepower. You know, you put like a nice little 362 up there, you have a truck you can actually use. As you get larger on this guy, drivability goes down. Now, that being said, you can't take this little tiny S300 and put an S500. You know, it's like that meme where you see like stock internals on 40 psi, and it's like that really skinny dude lifting up that really large Marge lady. Same concept. You're just gonna thrust this compressor so hard, it's gonna either hit the compressor or it's gonna thrust right through the bearings, and you're gonna have quite a nice horsepower trophy. So it's really up to you. A really good combination is like a 362, 475, or 480. And if you do the 480, you can step up this charger. These are cheap. These are like 800 bucks on Jegs or Summit. And they work really well. And they're nice because you don't have to run a spacer on the manifold. And Smeding sells these turbos on eBay. I think I paid like 1,100 bucks for this. Billet 488, 360 thrust, bad mamma jamma. And then, you know, if you want that big single and you want to keep your bottom end alive, the 467-7 is okay. The S300 series, the SXE line, I know so many people hate them, but they worked really well for me. I've never had an issue with them, other than a 366 on the manifold, not in a compound setup, is pretty laggy. Much laggier than even a 369 on a 12 valve. And then the other combo, or not combo, but charger I've seen a lot of people use, is the $600 475 with the big 96mm turbine. That's not really a street truck. Can you drive it on the street? Sure. You know, you can drive Bigfoot on the street if you really wanted to, but you do lose drivability. And the higher the timing is, the more drivability you lose. The bigger the charger is, the more drivability you lose. Now there are some things we can do to offset that, and it's in the transmission. The looser your converter is, the better it will spool a larger charger. However, when you raise that stall, you're actually not changing the physical outside of the converter, but you're moving the turbine away from the impeller to get that. So you're going to notice your engine revving higher, but the mile per hour isn't going as fast as a tight converter. So with compounds, this truck runs a V10 stall, like out of a V10 Magnum. I think it's like a 2500, 2600 stall from DPC. And yeah, I mean, use boots, good boots, you know. And for compound piping, like I bought this off Jegs or Summit, and then I just tack welded all the way around to make a little ridge for the boot to grab. And then I bought these spring clamps from Power Driven. I think they're like $8. You know, it's cheap and you can reuse them. These clamps have been in service for probably 3 or 4 trucks. And they just keep taking abuse. The only time is sometimes you have to replace the bottom washer on there. But that pretty much sums it up. For the valve train on this truck, it literally is stock 12 valve train. Stock pedestals, obviously machined for head studs, but that's it. You know, I run one Napa battery. It's worked well so far, and yeah, I mean, you can have a budget built truck. It doesn't have to cost a fortune. It will perform. You know, you just gotta live with it. You know, this thing, let me see if I can get a nice shot of it here. This thing's ugly. I know it's ugly, but you know what? It spanks a lot of people, and it hurts a lot of feelings. Because usually, you know, I have less in my truck than most people have in their engines. So it's kind of cool. Some of the other things that we did is for the front end and stuff like that. On this truck, let me get you guys moved down here on the front end here, even though you ain't gonna be able to see much of anything. The light. So on the front end of this truck, we have stock axle shafts. I have the cheap AutoZone hubs. I have Moog ball joints from eBay, and then I bought the 99 steering kit off of Amazon. I have O'Reilly's sway bar end links, and then the only thing I did spend money on was I bought a Fox steering stabilizer. All the shocks all the way around are Bilstein 5100s. I have limiting straps in the front here. Let me show you guys those. Get you guys a nice little close up here. So there's the limiting straps. These are Dodge off-road control arms. We were worried about the sled pull with all that torque and chassis vibration, so we went with those. We also have a Dodge off-road track bar, which, let me lay down here so I can give you guys kind of a nice little shot here. Dodge off-road track bar, which you can't really see, but it's back there. The 99 steering, which is a T-bar. The Fox stabilizer. I got all the mounting stuff from Rough Stuff Specialties. And that is a $40 eBay special steer box brace. Works great. Just because I didn't spend $200 for a name brand one doesn't mean it doesn't work. Just means I'm not paying for their logo. And a lot of the budget building, you know, as I sit here and look at this truck and talk, you know, a lot of it was just research. Finding out who made what for who. You know, I have an eBay fuel cell. It was like 80 bucks. Works great. And then I didn't get carried away on the interior. I moved the ECM to in here. It's back there. Cheap fire extinguisher from Costco. Those are my sled pole, sled pulling U-joint scatter shields. I have a B&M ratchet, or sorry, gated shifter that I made to accept 2 switches for lockup and overdrive. And then that button up there is the nitrous. My wastegate controller is a Harbor Freight air compressor controller. I believe it was $6. Works great. Never had an issue with it. And then I have all ISPRO gauges. And then all I did, I just stapled the crap out of my headliner. Just to have it hold. Yeah, the garage is a mess. Don't even get me started. Now, when it comes to budget building on a transmission, that is hard to do. And I will show you why. This is a billet input shaft. See all that nice spline twist? Yeah, it's done. So, I was forced to shell out a little bit of money. Now, this is pretty much the same transmission, just a little bit different. We got the converter refreshed because I ran high timing, and the high timing rattled my torque converter bolts loose, which then led to hollowing out the flex plate and the converter. Since we broke the input shaft, or sorry, twisted the input shaft, which by the way, it was used. I had it from a long time build. We went to a fat input from TCS. We have a 48 RE pump, and the reason why these pumps are better is because they actually produce more volume, which, since the restrictions stayed the same, equates to more pressure. Pumps do not create pressure, they create volume. I don't care who you are, what your job is. I am a forklift technician. I deal with hydraulics on the daily, and there's your facts of life. The other thing, I got a Summit single deep pan on this bad Larry. I think it was like 120 bucks with shipping. A lot cheaper than the Mag High-Techs and all the rest of them. And then I went ahead and I had Dustin at Power Driven rollerize my planetary. I don't have any planetaries out, but basically they machine a groove in the planetary to accept a roller bearing instead of a thrust bearing, which, or you can call it a thrust plate. Tomato. But yeah, that's pretty much it. We got the 6.7 build coming right along. I got the block machined. I'll do like kind of an episode on what this is getting, what it's not getting, and why we're building it. The last little bit on the engine. Stock 12 valve rods are extremely strong. They really are. The reason why they kind of got a bad name is people started putting them in common rails, and then EFI Live came out and people were blowing them up because the bottom end torque was insane. 12 valve rods will live a very long time. The only weak point they have is their rod bolts, which I think I have some over here. Bear with me here, folks. No, you want to see the flex plate damage? Hold on a sec. Let me get you going here. See these holes? Yeah, they're no longer circular. They're ovals because I forgot to check my converter bolts. Just wanted to have a nice professional video for you guys with the good props, stuff like that. So this is a factory rod bolt. Come on. Factory rod bolt. Wow. And they stretch, and that allows the cap to do what it wants. ARP makes a rod bolt, Hazley makes a rod bolt. I'm telling you right now, Hazley rod bolts are stronger. Changed my mind. And other than that, in all my builds, I always like to use new bearings. I use Cleveite bearings. H bearings work great. HX is kind of cool, just really pricey, so I don't use them because I'm cheap. And yeah, the other things you gotta worry about on these 12 valves, besides death wobble, rust, all that lovely stuff, is the bushings and mounts. You know, if you're gonna turn up the horsepower, at least get those what are they called? Those like motor mount inserts from Synergy. You know, that's all I run on this 12 valve. And you know what? I torque the ever living crap. You probably can't see them. They used to be red, but I just rattle canned right over that because all the haters hate it. You can see even these have kind of taken a beating, and they haven't been in here that long. And then this is my wastegate. So basically, because I make so much drive pressure with a 13mm pump, because of the fuel rate, I basically just wastegate it to the atmosphere. And yeah, that's what I do. That's where the ECM used to be. Obviously the air conditioning is all ripped out. And then, oh, I do have Scheid 120 lines. If you have a 12mm pump, I would not recommend these. They make your truck idle, really rough. They lope. And I don't care whose sister's brother's cousin has told you otherwise. Loping trucks on a street truck with a 12mm pump, you know, oh well, you do you, boo. But anyway, some 91 lines work great, 84 lines work great, or even stock lines work great. You can make a lot of power on stock lines. And yeah, the only other things we have, sorry, there's the water tank right here. Camera. Right there, the nitrous hookup right there, that's where the bottle goes. And that's about it. As far as the driveline goes, I have just factory driveline with Dana Spicer U-joints and 2 derail transcoolers I got from Summit. Really nice, really cheap, they work well.
So guys, I hope you learned some stuff. I hope I didn't offend anybody. It is 2018, so you know you gotta watch what you say these days. And I really hope you guys learned something. I'm not an expert. I don't have a degree in diesel drag racing. I have a lot of horsepower trophies of broken stuff along the years, and yeah, you know, I'm approachable. You can hit me up on Instagram. I'll put it right down here. I have people send me all kinds of questions and comments, sometimes hate, whatever, I don't care. I mean, I don't want to sound cocky, but I've been doing this long enough that I'm confident in my abilities. And there's very few people that can change my mind, and they're at a whole different level. That being said, I'm not perfect. Every truck responds a little differently. You know, one truck can go on the dyno with a stock turbo and make 600 horsepower, and one truck can go on the dyno and only make 230 horsepower, and it could be all the same stuff. I mean, every truck's different. The condition of the engine, the actual like cylinder leakage, like a valve could be leaking through the rings. You could have a cracked piston. I mean, there's so many what ifs. It's hard to cover it all, and that's my biggest fear about doing this. Is I don't want somebody. Good thing about that Harbor Freight. I don't want somebody taking my advice as this is the one-stop shop to, making huge power. There are plenty of guys that do it, and I've learned from, and I've taken what they've learned, and I've continued to experiment it with myself. Now that I've done this for a while, I'm able to put the cause and effect together and make a solution. If it's your first time building a diesel truck, don't go all in. As you up the horsepower, the amount of money to maintain it becomes much larger. My UCC truck costs a lot of money. I usually have to tow it anywhere I go. It burns through fuel. I have to add oil all the time. Parts break a lot. And it gets expensive, versus my truck back here right now at least is a 5.9 that makes like, 500 horsepower. I change the oil, kick the tires, make sure she's happy. Truck like this, my transmission went out because I'm an idiot and I didn't check the linkage. That cost a lot of money. That was a big mistake, and if I didn't have the support from some of these companies, it would cost me even more money. I had a guy that wanted to ask about sponsorships. Sponsorships aren't given, and to this day nobody has ever given me a part. I mean, they always want a little bit. I mean, these people, the diesel performance industry, a lot of these companies are small, like their profit margins are thin. If they're giving you a product at cost, like that's a huge deal. Like, I don't know where this notion came from, like sponsorships and stuff like that. Like, I don't just call the companies that sponsor my race truck and ask for free stuff. I'm like, hey, this is what's wrong. What can we do to fix it? Like, I'm trying to stay around this budget mark, and they make it work, but I still pay for my parts. And you don't get sponsored overnight. You have to show some dedication. I've gone racing. I've now been to UCC qualifier, and people know I mean business. So when I tell them that, I'm going to run their product on a big stage, they take that, and I've earned their trust. When I first started working with Power Driven, they didn't know who I was. And it's not that they're bad guys, but everybody wants to build these insane trucks, and it's awesome, but very few people do. So you kind of got to prove that you're in it for the long haul before they start investing their time and money into you. And never take it for granted. A lot of people they'll start to get a little bit sponsored or whatever, and then they start trash talking and all this other stuff. Like, I'll always work with a company. There's only one company in the diesel performance industry that I refuse to do business with. And I'll leave them out of it because it doesn't benefit y'all and it doesn't benefit me. But I'm open to anybody. And I love working with new companies, trying out new products and seeing how they work and how they affect my truck. And it gives me an opportunity to meet people. You want to get sponsored, put together a truck, build it yourself. I tip my hat to the guy that builds the 500 horsepower truck and is at the track thrashing on it, and when something breaks he knows how to fix it. I laugh at the guys that make 2,000 horsepower trucks and they need some specialist to come in and do this. Like, eventually you get to a certain point where you need like the specialized equipment and tools, and I get that, but it says a lot more to me if you build it yourself, or if you're a part of the process. Like, I don't build transmissions, but I was there. I helped assemble it. Like, I was able to see what they were doing. Can I replicate it? Absolutely not. I'm not a transmission expert, never will claim to be one, but I was a part of it. And even if you get an engine from like Freedom or D&J, like, try to be a part of it so you can understand it. The biggest thing I see is guys turn their trucks way up and they have no experience, and then they grenade it, and then they immediately start talking about the engine builder and this and that. And I've had 2 engines that I've built for people. I actually own my own company, the Horse Torques Diesel LLC. I do engines, and I got burned on one kid's engine. You know, he decided to run it without oil in it, and somehow that was my fault. But if he would have just come here, and I always let people come when I'm putting together their engines, they can sit here, do whatever. It's a good time. So just don't burn the people that you're trying to do business with. Because 9 times out of 10, when I've broken somebody's part, they've gone above and beyond to make it right. Even if I've messed it up. And honesty is the best policy, you know. So I appreciate you guys watching this. I hope it wasn't too cringy or too long or whatever, but I had a lot of people ask me to kind of put out videos like this, and I'm looking forward to doing it. And if this turns into some YouTube sensation, awesome. If this just turns into like 300 people that want to tune in every once in a while and see my shenanigans, then awesome. I really don't care. I'm not doing this to get rich. The time has come for me to start helping other people. I still have a lot to learn. I don't know everything, but I'm at a point now where I might be able to help you out, and I have no problem with it. You can send me like little questions or whatever on this, or you can see me on Instagram. It's just a P-Pump12V as in valve, and you can ask me a question. I'm a public page. I don't care. I don't delete comments. I don't block people. You know, I'm not a child. As long as you stay respectful, I'll try to do what I can for you. Or if I can't, I will get you to the people that can. I have a lot of people's questions that they ask me. I just don't know. So I send them to go talk to the person that does know. That maybe they've never heard of. Yeah, you know, whether it's 200 horsepower, 2,000 horsepower, go do something with it. Have fun. Use your truck. Drag race it. Sled pull it. Dyno it. Like, enjoy it. And try to bring a positive light on this sport. This sport's only going to be around for as long as we continue to respect other people. You know, you look at Shides and Rocky Top and all these. These are awesome events, but if you look at the chaos that goes on in the cities, like, they hate it. So the next time you're going to do a freeway pull or something like that, just, you know, keep in mind that there's a lot of people that don't like diesel trucks, and by you literally rolling coal all over them, they just hate us even more. You know, we're getting to the technological point where we can make insane power and stay relatively clean. You know, my 12 valve smokes like a freight train, but once the turbo is lit, it cleans up really well. So yeah, I had a lot of fun doing this video. Hopefully it helped somebody out. If you guys want me to continue this, then let me know. If you guys want me to just disappear, then I can do that too. But I did enjoy this, and I hope I helped somebody. Have a nice night, guys.